This video is solving quadratics by factoring. So our first example, we have 7x squared minus 14x equals 0. What we need to make sure of is that everything is on one side of the equal sign. Okay, and we have it set equal to 0. Then I need to look for the GCF first. If I look, my GCF for this equation is 7x. Okay, so I'm going to divide everything by 7x. So remember, my GCF goes on the outside. I write down what I have left over. 7x squared divided by 7x is x. Negative 14x divided by 7 is a negative 2. Set equal to 0. Now that I have it factored, I can separate each factor and set them equal to 0. And I solve for x. So in this first one, 7x equals 0, I divide both sides by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1x. And then 0 divided by 7 is 0. Then the next one, x minus 2 equals 0. I add 2 to both sides. Plus 2. Those cancel out. X equals 2. So my x-intercepts, or where my graph crosses, is at 0, 0, and 2, 0. So these are my two x-intercepts. Looking at example 2, okay, what I need to do first is make sure everything is on the same side of the equal sign. So I need to move this 24 over, so I subtract 24 from both sides. The 24s cancel out. Now, remember that negative 8x and negative 24 are not like terms. Therefore, I cannot combine them. So I write it like this, and then it's set equal to 0. After I do that, I need to look for my GCF first. So my GCF for this problem would be 2. I'm going to divide everything by 2. Everything by 2. So 2x squared divided by 2 is just an x squared. Remember, your GCF goes on the outside. Negative 8x divided by 2 is a negative 4x. And then negative 24 divided by 2 is a negative 12. And I set it equal to 0. Now I need to factor this inside part. So this part right here, I need to factor it. So I'm going to use my x in my box. So to get the top of the x, I do first times the last. I get negative 12x squared. Then my middle term goes on bottom, negative 4x. I need to figure out what can I multiply to get 12, negative 12, add to get negative 4. So I'm going to write down my factors for 12. So 1 and 12. If I try to add or subtract those, I don't get 4, so I mark it off. 2 and 6. Well, if I subtract and make 6 negative, I get a negative 4, so there's my factors. So I get a 2x minus 6x. Then I can go to my box. First term, first square. Last term, last square. And then my two side parts go in my top right and bottom left boxes. And then I see what they have in common. So x squared and 2x, they have an x in common. Then x times what gives me an x squared? Well, x times x gives me x squared. X times what gives me a 2x? A positive 2. X times what gives me a negative 6x is a negative 6. And so I have my factors. So I have my GCF, and then I have my x plus 2, and my x minus 6, and they're set equal to 0. Now that I have it factored out, I can set each factor equal to 0. I don't have to worry about the 2 because it does not have a variable. So I do x plus 2 equals 0. X minus 6 equals 0. For this one, I need to subtract 2 from both sides. Okay, so when I do that, the 2's cancel out. I'm left with x equals negative 2. Then here, I need to add 6 on both sides. So I get x equals positive 6. Then I have to write them as points. So my x-intercepts are negative 2, 0, and 6. 0. Okay, moving on to example 3. So looking at example 3, I have 2x squared minus 57 equals 15. Okay, I need to get all my terms to one side. So I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. Now, if I notice, the 57 and the 15 are like terms, so I can combine them. So I get a negative 72, and it equals 0 because the 15s cancel out. Now I need to look for my GCF. So my GCF for this one is 2. So I divide everything by 2. Well, 2x squared divided by 2 is just an x squared. Negative 72 divided by 2 is a negative 36. And I set it equal to 0. Then I notice I'm missing my b term. So I'm going to add in a 0x so I can see it and factor like normal. 0x minus 36 equals 0. So then I go straight to the x in the box. So x squared times a negative 36, I get a negative 36x squared, 0x. Okay, in order to multiply to get 36 and add to get 0, well, if I'm going to add to get 0, I have to have the same number but different signs. So I'm going to have a positive and a negative. And I can take the square root of 36, which is 6. 6x minus 6x. If I add those, then I get 0. If I multiply, I get a negative 36. So I go to the box, I get x squared, negative 36, and then my positive 6x and my negative 6x. Well, x squared and 6x have an x in common. X times what is x squared? Well, x. X times what is 6x? A positive 6. X times what is a negative 6x? Get a negative 6. So I write out my factors. I have 2, which was the GCF, times x plus 6, times x minus 6 equal to 0. Well, now I need to solve for x. Again, I don't have to set the GCF equal to 0 because it does not have a variable. So I get x plus 6 equals 0, x minus 6 equals 0. This first equation, I subtract 6 from both sides. The 6's cancel out. I get x equals negative 6. The second equation, I add 6 to both sides. The 6's cancel out. X equals a positive 6. So my x-intercepts are negative 6, comma 0, and positive 6, comma 0. So x-intercepts right there. Okay, example number 4. I have a 10x squared minus 3 equals 13x. Okay, again, I need to get all my variables to one side. So I subtract 13x, subtract 13x. No like terms to combine with the 13x. So I leave it as a 10x squared minus 13x minus 3 equals 0. I go straight to the x in the box. There's no GCF, so I'm going to write that so I remember I checked for it. No GCF. So x in the box. So 10x squared times a negative 3. I get a negative 30x squared. Negative 13x goes on the bottom. What can I multiply to get a negative 30x squared, but add to get a negative 13? Or subtract to get a negative 13. Okay, so I do 1 and 30. Any way that goes, I can't get a negative 13. 2 and 15. Well, if I make the 15 negative, I can get that negative 13. So I have a 2x and a negative 15x. Then I go to my box. 10x squared, negative 3. I get a 2x and a negative 15x. Now I have to see what 10x squared and 2x has in common. Well, 10 and 2 are both divisible by 2. X squared and x are both divisible by x, so they have a 2x in common. 2x times what gives me a 10x squared? I need to multiply it by 5x. 2x times what gives me a 2x? Well, a positive 1. 5x times what gives me a negative 15x? That would be a negative 3. So now I have my factors. I have 5x plus 1 times 2x minus 3. I set it equal to 0. So 5x plus 1 equals 0. 2x minus 3 equals 0. I need to solve for x, so first I have to subtract 1 from both sides. This is a two-step equation. So I get 5x equals negative 1. Then I need to divide by 5. 5x divided by 5 is a 1x. Okay, so I get x equals a negative 1/5. Leave it as a fraction. Okay, and then I do add 3 to both sides. 2x equals 3. Then I need to divide both sides by 2. X equals 3 over 2. No need to turn it into a mixed number. Just leave it as an improper fraction. So my x-intercepts for this one would be a negative 1/5, comma 0. And 3/2, comma 0. Okay, moving on to my last example. I have 4x minus 8 equals 0. Okay, this one can go about it two ways. I'm going to show you the factoring way, and then I'm going to show you just the normal way. So I'm going to split my page in half. So if I wanted to factor this, first off, everything is on one side, which makes it nice. My GCF equals 4, so I'm going to factor out a 4, so I divide everything by 4. So the 4's, I'm left with my GCF, and then I get x minus 2 equals 0. My GCF right here doesn't have a variable, so I don't have to worry about setting it equal to 0. So then I get add 2, and I get a positive 2. So my x-intercept would be 2, comma 0. Okay, the other way you could do it is, if you notice, it's just a simple two-step equation. So if I add 8 to both sides, I get 4x equals 8. Divide both sides by 4. The 4's make a 1. I get x equals 2. No matter what, I get 2, comma 0 is my x-intercept. Okay, this one's more of a linear problem, but we still need to make sure that we're practicing it. So this is the video for solving quadratics by factoring.